Why does the most highly evolved, complex supercomputer in the universe, your brain, right, completely shut down and just surrender? Because your bedroom is, like, a little bit cold at 6:20 a.m.
Right? It's almost laughable when you frame it that way.
Seriously, I want you to picture this exact scenario, because we have all been there, probably this week, you know.
Oh, absolutely.
You are in bed. It is pitch black. Outside, you can hear that faint, rhythmic drumming of rain against the window pane.
The absolute best sleeping weather.
The best. And underneath the heavy weight of your blanket, you have created this perfect microclimate of just absolute unmatched coziness.
You're safe, you're warm.
Exactly. But then the alarm pierces the quiet, and you promised yourself last night that today was the day you were finally going to start running.
Or wake up early to, write that business plan.
Right. But the second you pull the blanket down just an inch, that cold air hits your face, and suddenly a voice in your head speaks up with this perfect, calm, undeniable logic.
The rationalization starts instantly.
It really does. It whispers like, it's raining out there, you didn't sleep well. One more day of rest is actually healthier for your immune system.
Which sounds so responsible in the moment.
It does. So, you hit snooze. Today we are exploring the invisible biological war happening right there under your blanket.
It really is a war, yeah.
We are unpacking the hidden mechanics of human potential, uncovering why change feels biologically impossible, and examining how microscopic, almost laughable daily actions can physically rewire the structure of your mind.
It is a fascinating biological battleground, and the very first thing we have to do is completely validate that specific 6:00 a.m. struggle for you.
Yes, please. Because I feel terribly guilty every time I hit snooze.
Right, because society loves to frame hitting the snooze button or failing to start a new habit as a lack of moral character.
Oh, totally. We use these heavy, judgmental words.
Exactly. We call ourselves lazy or undisciplined or just unmotivated.
Yeah.
But the research we're analyzing today paints a drastically different, like purely mechanical picture. This isn't a moral failing at all.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because framing it as a physical mechanism completely shifts the guilt.
It should shift the guilt. You are operating a beautifully complex, incredibly sophisticated, and profoundly stubborn piece of machinery.
Stubborn is definitely the right word for my brain at 6 a.m.
Right. But in that moment, your brain is doing precisely what it evolved over millions of years to do. It is fighting to conserve energy and avoid discomfort.
So it feels like my brain is literally trying to keep me alive by keeping me warm and motionless in that bed.
That is exactly what is happening. I mean, if we look back at the vast stretch of our evolutionary history, calories were scarce. Food was not guaranteed.
Right, there were no grocery stores.
Exactly. Unnecessary exertion didn't just mean you were tired. It could mean you wouldn't have the energy reserves to outrun a predator later that day.
Oh, wow. So it could literally mean death.
Literally. Your brain is fundamentally a survival engine. When it senses the cold air and calculates the massive energy expenditure required to go for a run, it immediately throws up a logical defense mechanism.
To stop you from wasting precious fuel.
Yes. It is an evolutionary masterpiece of energy efficiency.
That makes so much sense. So to overcome that, we need a strategy that is vastly superior to just, trying hard.
Oh, trying hard is the worst strategy.
Let's start with the sheer biology of the rut we find ourselves in. What is actually happening in the brain's physical architecture when we just cannot seem to break a bad habit?
Well, to understand the rut, we have to look at how the brain manages its daily workload. The current version of you, the person listening to this right now, is simply the accumulated physical result of your past habits.
Okay, the physical result.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The brain makes up only about 2% of your body weight, but it consumes roughly 20% of your body's total energy.
Wait, 20%? That's huge for such a small organ.
It's incredibly resource hungry. Because of this, it is constantly ruthlessly looking for ways to automate behaviors so it doesn't have to consciously think about them.
Right, because conscious thought burns heavy glucose.
Exactly. And automated habits burn almost nothing.
So it wants to put as much of our life on autopilot as possible just to save battery power.
Precisely. When you repeat an action, the brain carves out a neural pathway. Think of it like a landscape.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
The first time you do something new, it's like a tiny trickle of water trying to find its way down a rugged dirt hill. It meets a lot of resistance, it gets diverted, it takes time.
Yeah, it's messy and slow.
Right. But the more you repeat that exact action, the more water flows down that specific path. Over time, that trickle becomes a stream, then a rushing river, and eventually it carves a deep, massive canyon into the landscape.
Wow. And once the canyon is there, the water has no choice but to flow through it.
It has no choice. That is what a deeply ingrained habit is. It is a neurological canyon. And the longer you've had a habit, the deeper the canyon gets.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
So when I'm lying in bed, the habit of hitting the snooze button is this massive, smooth-flowing river at the bottom of a deep canyon.
Yep. It takes absolute zero effort for the water to go there.
My hand just moves to the alarm clock automatically. I don't even remember doing it half the time.
Zero effort. And conversely, when you try to change a habit, when you try to force yourself out of bed in the cold, you are essentially trying to force that rushing river to suddenly flow up and out of the canyon.
Defying gravity.
Exactly, defying gravity and trying to carve a brand new path through solid rock.
No wonder it feels so exhausting. Like, it is physically, literally exhausting.
And it's neurologically exhausting. But the resistance goes even deeper than just energy conservation.
Really? What else is there?
Well, the sources point out something incredibly profound about how the brain perceives the act of changing a routine.
Okay, what is it?
Because the brain relies on these established patterns to predict the world and keep you safe from harm, it actually registers a sudden deviation from a deeply ingrained habit as a literal threat to your survival.
Wait, a threat? Like, the brain equates waking up early to facing down a predator.
On a fundamental neurological level, yes.
That is wild.
The text highlights that the brain's amygdala, the threat detection center, can actually interpret things like breaking a deep-seated social norm or radically altering a physical routine as actual physical pain.
Physical pain from waking up early.
Yes. The same pain centers in the brain that light up if you touch a hot stove or stub your toe, those same centers can light up when you try to force yourself to completely abandon a comfortable, established routine.
Because the brain resists the change. The unknown is unpredictable.
And to the primitive brain, unpredictable equals dangerous. It equates the familiar with safety, even if the familiar is an objectively terrible habit, like smoking or extreme procrastination.
Wow. That fundamentally changes how I view my own procrastination.
How so?
Well, that feeling of sheer dread I get when I look at a blank computer screen to write a challenging proposal, my brain is treating that blank page like a physical threat to my safety.
Exactly. It's not that you're just lazy. Your threat detection system is firing.
Because staring at that blank page requires massive cognitive energy and adventures into the unknown. It triggers the alarm bells.
Exactly.
But, hearing all this biological reality, it can sound pretty bleak.
Oh, it can sound very discouraging.
Yeah, you might listen to this and think, well, my canyons are dug. I'm 40 or 50 or 60 years old. The concrete has set in my brain.
I am who I am, and the rivers aren't changing.
Exactly. But the text explicitly shatters that fatalistic idea. It introduces this beautiful concept called the youngest day.
Yes. It is one of the most liberating concepts in modern neuroscience.
I love this part. The text explicitly states that there is absolutely no age limit to neuroplasticity.
None, zero.
We used to think the brain was like clay that hardened after your 20s, but we now know it remains highly malleable until the very end of life.
Yes, the plasticity is always there.
The text says that today, no matter what your chronological age is the youngest day of the rest of your life. Every single morning you wake up, it is a biologically fair, clean slate to start carving a new neural pathway.
Your brain is ready and physically capable of learning right now. The machinery never loses its inherent ability to adapt.
Provided you give it the right inputs, right?
Provided you give it the right inputs and sufficient repetition. Synaptic pruning and the creation of new neural connections happen throughout the entire human lifespan.
Okay, let's ground this in a concrete example because I think it's really easy to misunderstand the limits of this plasticity.
That's true. People take it out of context.
Right, so imagine someone who just turned 65 and retired. They have never put on a pair of boxing gloves in their entire life, but they suddenly decide their ultimate life goal is to become the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, fighting 20-year-olds.
Right. In that extreme scenario, physics, joint wear, bone density, and just basic physiological aging are going to have a very firm say in the matter.
They will say absolutely not.
Exactly. The brain is undeniably plastic, but the body has structural mechanical limits.
Right. But if that exact same 65-year-old retiree sets a goal to win an amateur age-bracketed boxing tournament at their local community gym,
That's a totally different story.
their brain's neuroplasticity absolutely, 100%, allows for that mastery. They can wire new reflexes, they can learn highly complex footwork, and master intricate striking combinations just as effectively as someone younger.
It might take slightly more repetition to carve the canyon initially.
Sure, but the hardware is still fully capable of running the new software. The potential for internal transformation is never capped by age.
It is only capped by the methods we use to try and force the change.
And that leads directly to my pushback on this.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because I hear this and I think, okay, the brain is plastic, I can carve new rivers, today is my youngest day. But practically speaking, when I actually try to change my life, if the brain is so wonderfully adaptable, why does it feel like I am trying to turn a massive steel cruise ship with a tiny, flimsy wooden paddle?
That is the universal frustration, isn't it?
It really is. I paddle and paddle, I exert all this energy, and the ship just keeps drifting in the exact same direction it always has.
Well, the answer to that frustration is that you are using the wrong kind of paddle.
The wrong paddle.
Yes. When we try to change our lives, most of us rely on this incredibly vague, nebulous concept called willpower.
Oh, willpower. The ultimate trap.
It is. We say, I'm going to try harder today, I'm going to be a better person, I'm going to be more disciplined. But willpower is not a structural tool. It is not a steering wheel.
What is it?
Willpower is just a temporary burst of energy. And as we know, it depletes very quickly as the day goes on.
By 3 p.m., my willpower is completely gone.
Exactly. What the source material suggests is that we have to stop relying on vague intentions and start making concrete agreements with our biology.
Okay, so if willpower is useless as a structural tool, what actually works for high-level achievers? Because clearly some people manage to turn the cruise ship.
They do it by completely redefining what a habit is. The text provides a monumental shift in perspective here.
I'm ready.
When we talk about habits, we usually think of them as rigid routines or punishing disciplines. But the text defines a habit strictly as this. A habit is not a vague desire to try harder. A habit is, at its core, keeping a promise to yourself.
Keeping a promise to yourself.
Yes.
That sounds simple, but it actually changes the entire physical requirement of the action.
How so?
Because vague thoughts like, I will be more organized or I will eat healthier, they just evaporate into the ether. They have no physical form.
Right, they're invisible.
A promise, on the other hand, is tactile. It has defined edges. It is deciding, I will take my shoes off and place them neatly side by side in the closet the very moment I walk through the front door.
Yes. Or, I will make exactly 10 sales calls before noon.
Exactly. The brain desperately needs specificity.
It cannot act on an abstraction like better. It needs a defined parameter to know whether it succeeded or failed.
Let's just sit with the shoe example for a second, because the sensory detail is so important.
Paint the picture.
Think about the sensory detail of that seemingly insignificant action. You come home from work, your feet hurt, you are exhausted.
The old river canyon in your brain says, kick the shoes off in the hallway and collapse onto the couch. Conserve energy.
Right, but you made a specific promise. So you pick them up, you walk the extra 5 steps to the closet, you set them down, and you feel that satisfying tiny little click in your mind as you align the heels perfectly on the floor.
That little click is so important.
In that microscopic moment, you haven't just put away footwear. You have established a tiny pocket of order in your chaotic world.
You kept a promise.
You proved to your own subconscious that your word has physical value.
And what's fascinating here is the underlying mechanism, the psychology of self-trust.
Self-trust, like trusting myself to follow through.
Exactly. When you constantly say, I will try harder tomorrow, and then you inevitably fail because the goal is too vague, you are continually teaching your subconscious that you are a liar.
Oh, wow. That hits hard.
You are teaching your own brain that your conscious intentions mean absolutely nothing.
So my brain just stops believing me when I say I'm going to change.
Precisely. But when you make a tiny, hyper-specific promise and you physically execute it, you are slowly rebuilding the bridge of trust between your conscious desires and your subconscious automation.
The sources look at some fascinating case studies of this. What does this look like when scaled up?
Well, the text looks at a deeply compelling case study of a CEO who built a global empire using one of these tiny structured promises.
A global empire from a tiny promise.
Yes.
Yeah.
This was a regular corporate worker embedded in a normal, exhausting corporate life who made one incredibly simple promise to himself. He didn't promise to become a millionaire.
Right.
He didn't promise to revolutionize his industry or work 100-hour weeks. He simply committed to writing tomorrow's to-do list on a physical piece of paper every single night before he went to sleep.
That was the entire promise.
Was it?
A task that takes maybe 3 minutes and just involves a pen and paper.
Exactly. But he did this without fail every single night for 10 years.
10 years.
He never allowed his head to hit the pillow without that piece of paper being filled out. And over those 10 years, that single anchoring habit created a massive cascade of clarity and execution.
Because it's snowball.
It does. He eventually founded his own company, expanded its operations to 15 different countries, and became a highly successful global CEO.
That is wild. The core habit wasn't some massive undertaking called being successful. The habit was just writing the list.
That tiny 3-minute promise was the linchpin for a global empire.
Because it creates a domino effect. By organizing the next day the night before, he removed the morning decision fatigue.
Exactly. He woke up with a clear directive. That tiny kept promise compounded day after day, year after year.
I love that.
There is another example from the text that applies this exact same logic, not to business, but to deep internal self-image and physical health.
Oh, this is the one about the pageant winner, right?
Yes, it's about a woman who was deeply unhappy with her body. She had struggled for years with her weight and her self-esteem.
Something so many people can relate to.
Absolutely. But instead of going on some brutal, punishing crash diet driven by self-hatred and extreme willpower, she started with a tiny, almost bizarre daily promise.
Right.
She simply began telling herself out loud, "My body looks good," while she was eating her meals.
Okay, I have to stop you there.
I know how it sounds.
Because when I first read that in the source, my immediate thought was, this is absolute pseudoscience.
It sounds like it.
How can literally just speaking words out loud while chewing a piece of food change your physical body weight? I need the biology on this because on the surface, it sounds like pure magic or wishful thinking.
It does sound like magic until you look at the endocrine system and how auditory input intercepts the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis.
The HPA axis.
Yes, the HPA axis.
Walk me through exactly how that works because I need this to make sense.
Okay, let's break it down. When this woman used to eat, she was filled with guilt and self-loathing. Her brain perceived her own body and the act of eating as a source of extreme stress.
So eating was a threat.
Exactly. When the brain perceives stress, the amygdala sounds the alarm. It sends a distress signal to the hypothalamus.
The command center.
Right. The hypothalamus communicates with the rest of the body through the nervous system. It sends a signal to the pituitary gland, which then sends a signal down to the adrenal glands, which sit right on top of your kidneys.
And the adrenal glands release cortisol.
Right.
It's the stress hormone.
Exactly. Cortisol floods the bloodstream. Now, what does cortisol actually do physically?
It makes you feel anxious.
Well, yes, but from an evolutionary standpoint, cortisol prepares you to survive a famine or a predator attack. It signals the liver to dump glucose into the blood for quick energy.
Right.
But more importantly for this scenario, it signals the body to aggressively store fat, particularly around the midsection, as a survival reserve.
Because it thinks you might starve soon.
Exactly. At the same time, high stress activates the sympathetic nervous system, the fight-or-flight state. When you are in fight-or-flight, the body literally shuts down the digestive system.
It shuts down entirely.
Pretty much. Blood is routed away from the stomach and intestines and sent to the muscles. So if you eat while stressed, your body cannot metabolize the food efficiently, and it is chemically primed to store it as fat.
Wow. So hating her body while eating was biologically guaranteeing that her body would store fat and digest poorly.
Precisely. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now let's look at the intervention. She promised to say, "My body looks good," out loud.
Out loud, that's the key part.
Yes. When she speaks those words, the physical vibration of her vocal cords stimulates the vagus nerve.
Oh, the vagus nerve.
Right. The vagus nerve is the main component of the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest state.
Right.
Furthermore, hearing her own voice speak a positive affirmation forces the brain's threat detection center to stand down.
The brain thinks if we are speaking calmly and positively, there must not be a predator. We must be safe.
It's a biological override switch.
That is fascinating.
By consistently feeding her brain this positive auditory input, she actively deactivated the sympathetic nervous system. The alarm bells stopped. The HPA axis stood down, meaning cortisol levels in her bloodstream plummeted.
And with the cortisol gone, Her body stops hoarding the fat.
Exactly. With cortisol gone, her body was no longer in fat storage survival mode. Her digestive tract received proper blood flow. She organically and naturally shifted how she metabolized food because she was no longer eating in a state of chemical panic.
That is amazing.
Over time, without feeling deprived or using brutal willpower, she lost 10 kilograms. She felt so completely transformed and confident that she actually entered and successfully competed in a beauty pageant.
Wow. So it isn't magic at all. It is a profound mechanical biofeedback loop.
Completely mechanical.
That is absolutely incredible. It shows how deeply our physical reality is tied to the exact signals we send our nervous system.
We're constantly programming ourselves.
The sources actually give a third example that applies this same mechanism to our social environment.
The family dynamics one.
Yes. A person who had terrible, highly toxic relations with their family simply committed to a one-word promise.
Just one word.
The promise was to say thank you out loud, whenever there was even the slightest justification for it in the house. That was it. No long, emotionally draining apologies, no deep family therapy sessions to start, just thank you.
And what happened?
Well, over time, the entire atmospheric pressure of their home transformed. The family dynamic shifted completely just from introducing that tiny frequency of gratitude.
It makes sense. It changes the social ecosystem. When you introduce a new, consistent variable into a complex system like a family, the whole system has to adjust to accommodate it.
Because you can't be intensely defensive against someone who keeps sincerely saying thank you.
Right. It lowers the collective defensive posture of the entire household.
Okay, so we have these tiny promises. We know they work biologically. But let's be realistic here for a second.
Always a good idea.
Doing that for 30 days without seeing a single pound lost or a single dollar made is psychologically grueling.
It really is.
Even with a tiny promise, what happens when we inevitably stumble? You start the thank you habit or the shoes in the closet habit, and usually around day 3 or maybe day 8 if you're strong.
The enthusiasm completely fades.
The cold reality sets in.
The honeymoon phase of the new habit ends, and the brain realizes this new energy expenditure might be permanent.
Exactly. And the sources have a fantastic, highly descriptive name for what arrives at this exact moment.
I love this concept.
They call it the arrival of the devil's whisper. Now, you hear that term and you might think of like a cartoon devil on your shoulder telling you to do something evil. But that's not what this is.
Not at all.
Explain what the devil's whisper actually sounds like in practice.
Well, it doesn't sound evil at all. It sounds like profound personal wisdom.
That's the tricky part.
Very tricky. The devil's whisper is actually your brain's prefrontal cortex rationalizing the amygdala's desire for immediate comfort.
So the advanced brain is working for the primitive brain.
Exactly. The primitive brain wants to rest, and it recruits the advanced logical part of your brain to create an airtight argument for why resting is actually the smartest, most responsible thing you can do.
It's manufacturing the most brilliant, compassionate excuses imaginable.
Oh, they are so compassionate.
You're lying in bed on day 4 of your running habit, and the whisper says, you know what? You've worked so incredibly hard this week. You've been so stressed at the office. You deserve a break.
In fact, resting today will let your muscle fibers recover, making you run twice as fast tomorrow.
Right. Or you sit down to write, and the whisper says you are just too busy with real, important, urgent client work today to do your 10 minutes of journaling. It's irresponsible to journal when you have emails to answer.
The brain is actively using your own core values: hard work, responsibility, self-care, health, as weapons against your new habit.
Ed is a brilliant tactician.
It really is. This is a feature of evolutionary cognitive load balancing. But what the source material points out is that recognizing this whisper is not a sign of failure or weakness.
It's not.
No, it is actually a crucial, vital opportunity for self-awareness. When you hear the devil's whisper, you are looking into a mirror that is showing you your exact default nature.
Oh, I see. It's showing you the exact blueprint of your old river canyon. It shows you precisely how you have historically justified quitting in the past.
Exactly. Once you hear it and recognize it as a mechanical output of a tired brain trying to conserve energy, rather than profound personal wisdom, you can separate your identity from it.
You don't have to believe the excuse.
Right. You can step back and say, there's the biological excuse generator doing its job. Acknowledged but denied.
And this leads to a deeply comforting point from the text regarding how we view failure.
This is such a great reframing.
Let's say the whisper wins. You
Yeah.
give in, you hit snooze, your 3-day streak of waking up early ends. Society says you failed, you broke the chain, you have to go back to square one, you are undisciplined.
That's the standard narrative.
But the text argues that a 3-day streak that ends is not a failure. It calls it a 3-minute passion. And it argues that this short burst provides incredibly valuable data.
Data is the perfect word for it. It is a scientific experiment on yourself.
Yes, because even if you only succeeded for 3 days, you have built a tiny, undeniable foundation of physical evidence. You can look at yourself and say, I proved I could do it for 3 days. I know what that feels like. The capacity to execute that action exists within me.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of momentum, stopping is only a failure if you make the conscious decision to never restart.
Right.
If you break your streak on Thursday but you restart on Friday, then Thursday wasn't a failure, it was just a speed bump on a much longer road. The trajectory is still moving upward.
We have to strip the heavy moral weight off of the stumble. It's just a data point showing you where your current threshold is.
Exactly.
So practically, how do we get back on track when we hit that speed bump? The actionable advice from the text is brilliant because it targets the brain's energy conservation perfectly.
The advice is to lower the hurdle so much that it becomes conical.
You have to make the action so ridiculously easy that the brain cannot possibly justify saying no even when it is exhausted.
Let's visualize this. Let's say your promise is to keep a daily journal, writing 1 full page a day.
Right.
But it's 11:30 p.m., you just got home from a nightmare travel day, you are exhausted, your eyes are burning, and the devil's whisper is screaming at you to just go to sleep.
The rule is you don't write the page. You lower the hurdle. The rule becomes just write 1 line.
And if even writing 1 single line feels like too much cognitive load for a depleted brain,
Then you lower it again. The text implies you make it absurdly small. I think of the physical sensory touch of this. You are sitting on the edge of the bed in the dark.
yeah,
You reach over to the nightstand and pick up the journal. You feel the weight of it. You unscrew the cap of the pen. You press the tip of the pen to the paper, and you make a single solid dot of ink.
just a dot.
Just a dot. Then you put the cap back on, close the book, and go to sleep.
And neurologically speaking, making that single dot is a massive structural victory.
It feels like cheating, though. It feels like you didn't do the work.
It feels like cheating to your conscious mind, but to the brain's habit-forming circuitry, the basal ganglia, it is nearly identical to writing a novel.
Wait, really? Identical?
Because you initiated the sequence, you kept the promise. The habit is not the volume of the output. The habit is the initiation of the behavior.
Oh, that makes sense.
You prove to your brain that the identity of I am a person who opens my journal every night remains perfectly intact. You maintained the neural pathway. Even if you only sent a single drop of water down the canyon that day, you kept the canyon wet. You didn't let it dry up.
Okay, making a tiny promise like 1 dot in a journal works for day 4. But let's be realistic again.
Right.
How does the brain maintain a habit when the physical reward, the weight loss, the successful business, the newly learned language, is months or even years away?
That is the real trap.
Because we need motivation today. The text heavily suggests turning habit building into a video game.
This is where we have to consciously and intentionally leverage the brain's dopamine reward systems.
And it relies heavily on sensory details and visualizing progress in the physical world. Think about the physical act of tracking. Imagine buying a giant physical wall calendar.
I love physical calendars for this.
Every day you keep your tiny promise, you take a thick red permanent marker, and you draw a harsh, loud, scratchy X over that day. You hear the friction of the marker on the paper.
It's very satisfying.
Or think about wearing a step counter on your wrist. You're at 7,950 steps. You pace around your living room just to watch those tiny digital numbers roll over to 8,000.
We've all done that pacing.
When it vibrates or beeps, you feel that tiny rush of leveling up, just like getting a high score in a video game.
And that rush has a very specific chemical signature. What we are talking about here is dopamine.
The pleasure chemical.
Well, dopamine is often misunderstood just as the pleasure chemical, but it is actually the molecule of motivation, craving, and reward prediction error.
Reward prediction error, what's that?
The brain thrives on dopamine hits to maintain forward momentum. When you are building a new habit, the external, long-term reward like losing weight or building a business is simply too far away in the future to give you a dopamine release today.
Right. The primitive brain cannot wait 5 years for a reward.
Exactly. It needs a paycheck today to justify the energy expenditure. So by creating artificial milestones like watching a step counter roll over or getting to write a giant 100 on the 100th day of your calendar, you are manufacturing a dopamine required to keep the brain engaged.
You are tricking the brain into feeling victorious in the short term, which provides the chemical fuel to keep executing the habit.
Precisely. You are hacking the reward prediction error. You expect the satisfaction of making the red X. You execute the action. You get the satisfaction, and dopamine is released, cementing the behavior.
And we desperately need that chemical fuel because of one of the most vital, eye-opening concepts in this entire discussion.
The success divergence point.
Yes. The text introduces something called the success divergence point. And this concept completely shattered how I view the timeline of progress.
It is a critical paradigm shift for anyone trying to master a new skill.
We all assume growth is linear. We are taught that it looks like a steady staircase. You put in 1 unit of effort, you get 1 unit of visible result. 2 units of effort, 2 units of result.
A perfect, predictable 45-degree angle pointing up.
Right. But the text argues that growth is almost never linear.
Never. The staircase is a persistent myth that causes millions of people to quit right before they actually succeed.
I'm going to try an analogy here to explain the mechanism behind this, instead of just describing what it looks like.
Let's go for it.
It's like digging a trench to lay fiber optic cable for high-speed internet. For weeks, your front yard is an absolute mess. You are doing back-breaking, exhausting labor out in the sun, swinging a pickaxe, digging this massive trench.
Smells awful.
It is. And during all those weeks of brutal work, your internet speed in the house is exactly the same. It hasn't improved by a single megabyte.
You're putting in massive effort and seeing zero result.
Exactly. You are flatlining. But the moment you finally lay the cable, connect that final wire, and flip the switch, boom, you go from dial-up to gigabit speeds instantly.
You experience exponential growth in a single second.
But the structure physically had to be finished before the signal could travel.
That is a phenomenal analogy for what is happening neurologically. What you are describing is the biological process of myelination.
Oh, myelination. Explain myelination, because this is the invisible construction work happening in our heads.
When you practice a new habit, the electrical signals, the action potentials, travel down the axons of your neurons.
Like the electrical wires in the brain.
Exactly. At first, these signals are slow and leaky. But as you repeat the action, specialized cells in your brain called oligodendrocytes begin to wrap the axon in a fatty white substance called myelin.
So myelin is like the rubber insulation around a copper electrical wire.
Yes, perfect comparison. As the myelin sheath gets thicker, it prevents the electrical signal from leaking out. Furthermore, it allows for something called saltatory conduction, where the electrical impulse literally jumps rapidly down the nerve fiber.
Jumping down the fiber.
Yes, it increases the speed of the signal by up to 100 times.
100 times faster. So during the flatline, when we don't see any visible results in our life, our brain is actively laying down the myelin insulation.
Yes. We put in the effort, we make the promises, but for weeks or months, the visible results flatline. We see no change in our bodies, our bank accounts, or our skills.
But beneath the surface, the oligodendrocytes are working.
The neural momentum is building, the myelin is thickening, and then suddenly you hit what the text calls the success divergence point.
The moment you plug in the fiber optic cable.
Exactly. It is the moment the neural pathway is fully insulated and optimized. And suddenly, you aren't just improving steadily, you experience exponential vertical growth. The skill clicks. The habit becomes effortless.
So what does this all mean? It means that the flatline isn't a sign of failure. It is the necessary, unavoidable construction phase for exponential growth.
Right. It's mandatory.
If you listen to the devil's whisper and put down the pickaxe during that flatline, all of that accumulated effort, all that half-laid fiber optic cable is completely wasted.
And it means that patience is not just some moral virtue you read about in philosophy books. In the context of neurobiology, patience is a strict physiological requirement for neural rewiring.
The brain requires physical time to build the cellular infrastructure before it can produce the exponential behavioral output.
You literally have to wait for the biological concrete to dry in your head before the building can open for business.
Exactly. You cannot rush cellular growth.
No, you can't.
This brings us to a huge practical question, though. Because waiting for that concrete to dry, swinging that pickaxe every day during the flatline, requires energy.
It does.
The sources heavily suggest that we need to build mechanisms into our physical environment so we don't have to rely on our internal willpower at all.
We want to eliminate friction wherever possible. We want the new river canyon to be the path of absolute least resistance in the physical world.
Let's talk about some concrete examples of this.
Mm.
The classic one is night before preparation.
Always a game changer.
Think about the profound difference in sensory experience in the morning. Option A. Waking up groggy, the room is cold, you are stumbling around in the dark, stubbing your toe, looking for your socks, trying to find your running shoes buried under a pile of clothes in the closet.
I'm stressed just hearing that.
Right. Now, option B. Waking up and seeing your running shoes, your shorts, and your shirt perfectly laid out, pre-positioned right by the door, bathed in the light from the hallway.
It's inviting.
Or waking up to find the specific files you need for that morning's deep work perfectly stacked and squared away on an otherwise completely clean, empty, inviting desk.
By doing that, you are performing a tremendous act of neurological kindness for your future self.
Neurological kindness. I like that.
In the groggy morning, your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for complex decision-making, logical planning, and overriding impulses, is simply not fully online yet.
It's still asleep.
Exactly. Every single decision you have to make, from what shirt to where your shoes are, to which file to open first, drains that limited battery power. It causes decision fatigue.
So by preparing the environment the night before, you completely remove the friction of decision-making. You just execute the physical motion.
You don't have to decide to run. You just have to step into the shoes that are literally blocking your path to the bathroom. You outsource your prefrontal cortex to your living room.
That is brilliant. You alter the environment so the environment cues the behavior automatically.
Precisely.
But there is another mechanism the text discusses, which I found totally fascinating because it hacks our social biology.
Ah, the empathy hack.
Yes, it's bringing someone else into the promise. The example given is saying to a friend or a colleague, I'm going to send you an email every single morning at 5:100 a.m. for exactly 100 days.
This is an incredibly powerful mechanism because it taps into a very deep, primal part of our neurobiology. What you are utilizing here is the empathy hack.
Tell me more about that, because the text points out this incredible nuance about how our biological drive changes when others are involved. It's not just about accountability. It's deeper than that.
Well, we are fundamentally biologically social creatures. We evolved in tribes. For millions of years, our individual survival was entirely 100% dependent on the survival and the approval of the group.
Right. If you were cast out of the tribe, you died.
Because of this evolutionary history, the human brain is actually wired to generate significantly more energy, more adrenaline, and more sharp focus when we are performing an action for someone else rather than just for ourselves.
That is wild.
Yeah.
We will literally work harder for the tribe than we will for our own selfish gain.
Absolutely. If you tell yourself you'll wake up at 5 a.m. to read and you fail, you only let yourself down. The brain can rationalize that easily. I'm tired, I'll do it tomorrow. But if you know a respected friend is expecting an email at 5:00 a.m., failing means you are breaking a social contract. You are letting down a member of the tribe.
And the brain's amygdala registers that as a social risk.
A risk of ostracization. So it will flood your system with the adrenaline and focus needed to wake up and ensure you don't break that vital social bond.
The text gives a great real-life business application of this. Imagine you have to prepare a specific, highly detailed product catalog or a massive presentation.
A heavy lift.
Very heavy. If you are just doing it because it's your job and your manager told you to, it feels like a heavy, draining grind.
Just burning willpower.
But if you prepare it because you know a specific client, someone you respect and empathize with, will be genuinely thrilled and helped by seeing it, it changes everything.
It shifts the entire neurochemical state.
That emotional anticipation of their positive reaction fuels your action. It mixes oxytocin, the bonding hormone, with dopamine. It gives you a clean, sustainable energy source.
It shifts the task from a burden to a meaningful contribution. And the text has a beautiful, almost poetic phrase for this. Knowing others is knowing another version of yourself.
I love that phrase. It points out that even the simplest micro-social interactions change the environment. Something as basic as greeting your colleagues with a genuine smile and a bright, energetic good morning when you walk into the office.
It seems so small, but it's huge.
You aren't just being polite. You are actively changing the atmospheric pressure of the social ecosystem. And when people smile back and respond with energy, that feeds your own brain positive reinforcement. It's a biofeedback loop.
It is the ultimate win-win scenario built right into our evolutionary biology. Being considerate of others acts as a selfish biohack to elevate your own neurochemistry.
Okay, we are moving into the final phases of our exploration, but we have to talk about boasting delusion, and piercing the limit.
Oh, this is a controversial one.
Because we've talked about how to manage the present moment, but the conversation has to turn to how we view our future trajectory. And the sources draw a very sharp, very controversial distinction between two concepts: lying and boasting.
This is where the material challenges some deeply held social norms about humility and expectation.
Right. Because society says boasting is inherently bad. It's arrogant. But the analysis in the text clarifies the difference.
Yeah.
Lying, it says, is deceiving people about the present or the past.
Right.
If your salary is $50,000 and you tell people at a dinner party that it's $100,000, that is a lie. You are distorting current reality.
But boasting, in the context of this text, is something entirely different.
Boasting is setting a remarkably high public expectation for your future self.
Yes. If you just started your business in your cramped, cold garage, and you stand up in front of your family and say, in 5 years, my company will be a dominant national brand, people might call you a liar or a narcissist.
They usually do.
But the text says that isn't a lie at all. It is a declared trajectory. It is setting the final coordinates into the GPS before the car even starts moving.
By declaring it, especially publicly, you are engaging that social accountability mechanism we just talked about.
Exactly.
But you are also doing something vital internally. You are engaging the reticular activating system in your brain.
Ah, the RAS. Explain the reticular activating system, because this is where the boasting becomes a biological tool.
Right. The reticular activating system, or RAS, is a bundle of nerves at our brainstem that filters out unnecessary information so the important stuff gets through.
Because your brain is bombarded by millions of bits of sensory data every second.
Right. If you consciously processed all of it, you would go insane. So the RAS acts as the bouncer at the club of your conscious mind. It only lets in information that validates your core beliefs or focuses on what you deem important.
Have you ever bought a red car, and suddenly you see that exact same red car everywhere you go?
All the time. It feels like everyone suddenly bought the same car.
They didn't. The cars were always there. But before, your RAS filtered them out as irrelevant data.
Oh, wow.
Once you bought one, you told your brain, red cars are important to my identity. So the RAS started letting that visual data through to your conscious awareness.
That is so cool.
When you boast about your future, when you vividly declare that you will be a national brand, you are programming your RAS. You are telling the bouncer, opportunities related to national expansion are highly important.
And suddenly you start noticing partnerships, ideas, and resources that were always there, but that you previously filtered out.
That is incredible. The text practically begs us to use this. It suggests that before you even get out of bed, while you are still wrapped in those blankets listening to the rain, you literally whisper out loud to yourself, I can do this, or I am going to succeed today.
You are actively hallucinating your success to prep the brain.
Exactly. You are downloading the software of victory before your feet even touch the floor.
You are flooding the system with the chemistry of confidence and setting the filter for the day.
But let's bring it back to harsh reality for a second. Let's talk about the absolute limit.
Little wall.
Yes. You've hyped yourself up, you've programmed your RAS, you've kept your tiny promises, you've pushed through the flat line of the divergence point, but eventually you hit a wall, a real solid wall.
Right. When you are physically exhausted, your muscles are burning, you are out of money, you are out of time.
You are deeply frustrated and your brain is screaming at absolute maximum volume that you have reached your absolute undeniable limit. You physically cannot take one more step.
This is the moment of truth in any massive endeavor. This is where most people turn around.
And the text provides a massive paradigm-shifting reframing for this exact moment. It drops a very powerful insight, which is deeply rooted in modern sports science and neurobiology, specifically the central governor theory.
Okay, the central governor theory.
Yes. When you hit what feels like your absolute undeniable limit, that is not the end of the journey. It is the starting line of the actual battle.
The starting line. After you've already run a marathon and feel like you're dying, I need you to break down this central governor theory, because this explains why we feel fatigue in the first place, right?
It does. The central governor theory fundamentally changes how we understand physical and mental exhaustion. We used to think that when you are running and your legs feel like lead, it's because the muscles themselves have completely run out of fuel.
Like they've run out of ATP or cellular energy,
Right.
or that lactic acid has poisoned them to a halt.
Exactly. We thought the muscle failed mechanically, like a car running out of gas.
Right. The tank is empty, the engine stops. Makes sense.
But that's not what happens. The brain monitors everything. It monitors your core body temperature, your oxygen levels, and the glycogen stores in your liver and muscles.
It's the ultimate control room.
Right. And the brain's ultimate goal is to maintain homeostasis and keep you alive. If you actually ran until your muscles completely depleted all their ATP, your heart, which is a muscle, would stop.
Oh, wow.
You would experience rigor mortis while still alive, and you would die.
That's terrifying.
It is. So the brain will never, ever let you get that close to actual mechanical failure.
So what is the feeling of exhaustion then, if it isn't mechanical failure?
Exhaustion is an emotion.
An emotion. Wait, seriously?
Yes, an emotion generated by the brain to protect you. Long before your muscles are actually out of fuel, the brain's central governor decides you are getting too close to the danger zone.
I see.
So it actively reduces the neural recruitment of muscle fibers. It literally dials down the electrical signal it sends to your legs. This creates the intense, overwhelming physical sensation of fatigue.
It makes your legs feel heavy and painful, forcing you to slow down and stop, thereby preserving an emergency reserve of fuel.
It's like the gas light in your car turning on and the car forcefully limiting your speed to 20 miles an hour when you actually still have 50 miles left in the tank.
That is the perfect analogy. The brain turns on the exhaustion light early to ensure you always have an emergency reserve. So when you feel the absolute limit, when every fiber of your being says, "Stop, I am dying," you have to realize that you are likely only at about 40 or 50% of your actual physiological capacity. The limit is an illusion created by a protective brain.
That is staggering. It means my perception of my own limits is a biological lie.
When you feel that limit, that is the exact, precise moment you finally have the opportunity to stretch the boundary of your capabilities.
Everything before that feeling of exhaustion was just getting to the starting line.
Pushing past that feeling of the limit is what physically forces the brain to adapt. When you push past the central governor's warning, the brain realizes, oh, this is the new normal. We need more capacity.
It forces the body to grow new blood vessels, to lay down more myelin, to increase mitochondrial density in the cells.
You are demanding that the body upgrade its physical hardware.
The limit is the starting line. That completely changes how I view pain and exhaustion.
Okay, we have covered so much immense ground today. We've gone from the evolutionary biology of our morning ruts to the power of tiny tactile promises, through the unseen myelin construction of the divergence point, and all the way to piercing the biological illusion of our own limits through the central governor theory.
It's a lot to process.
It is. I want to begin to wind down our exploration and kind of zoom out from the daily mechanics. We've been talking heavily about the micro, the one dot in the journal, the pair of shoes placed neatly, the single vocal vibration.
You're right, the small stuff.
But I want to shift to a broader reflection on the sheer magnitude of what we're actually working with inside our own existence.
The macro perspective. It's essential to integrate all of these microscopic biological details into the larger picture of human potential.
The text provides this incredibly beautiful, almost cosmic analogy that I think ties everything we've discussed together perfectly. It asks us to look closely at the natural world around us.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
If you look at the extreme chaotic complexity of a massive storm cloud formation, or the jagged, unpredictable peaks of a rugged mountain range, or the delicate, perfectly symmetrical crystalline structure of a single snowflake falling from the sky.
All these incredibly complex natural structures.
Right. And then you look at the staggering microscopic network of billions of neurons and synapses firing inside our own skulls. The text observes that they all contain the exact same geometric regularities.
They are all fractals. They are patterns that repeat themselves at every single scale, from the microscopic cellular level to the massive cosmic level.
It's mind-blowing.
The architecture of a brain cell looks startlingly similar to the architecture of the cosmic web of galaxies.
Yes, they are all governed by the exact same fundamental rules of physics and nature. And the text points out that this means we are not separate from nature. We are quite literally forces of nature ourselves.
We are governed by the exact same rules of gradual, persistent accumulation that build towering mountains and carve massive river canyons.
The mountain doesn't rise from the earth in a single day. The Grand Canyon wasn't carved in an hour. It is the slow, relentless, repetitive application of a seemingly small force over massive amounts of time.
Exactly, and that synthesis is so deeply empowering. It means that we are the active architects of our own internal mountains.
Every single tiny promise kept, every pair of shoes put away neatly, every thank you spoken to a family member to shift the ecosystem, every scratchy red X drawn on a calendar to trigger dopamine, every single dot made in a journal when our central governor was screaming at us to sleep, every single one of those acts is a drop of water.
And those drops are actively shaping the solid stone of our future selves. We are carving our own canyons.
When we connect this to the bigger picture, the realization that our brains are this plastic, this physically adaptable, and yet this susceptible to our own auditory inputs and narratives, places the responsibility for our trajectory firmly back in our own hands.
We are not prisoners of our past evolutionary wiring. We have the tools to be the engineers of our future pathways.
And so, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought. Something to just mull over as you go about the rest of your day, or perhaps when you wake up tomorrow morning.
Think about everything we've explored today.
Think about the fact that your incredibly complex, highly evolved, billions of years in the making brain actually cannot tell the difference between a real, physical limitation and a carefully practiced, logical-sounding excuse.
That is the crucial takeaway.
If your brain is that powerful and yet that gullible to the stories you tell it, what impossible thing are you perfectly capable of doing right now, today, if you simply decide to lower the hurdle to the floor, pick up a pen, and write just one single line?
Tomorrow morning at 6:00 a.m. when it's pitch black.
And the room is cold, and you can hear the faint rhythmic drumming of rain against the window pane. The alarm is going to sound, and the whisper is going to start. The only question is, what tiny promise are you going to keep?